Are there cards, Karen? No. Okay. Everybody ready to go? Okay. Welcome to the September 24th, 2024 meeting of the MCCSC Board of School Trustees. We ask that you please come to order. Tonight we begin with a project and preliminary determination hearing. After the presentation by the administration and its advisors, there will be an opportunity for the public to make comments about the project. For the hearing, we will ask that each person limit their comments to 3 minutes and that the topic be limited to this hearing. There will be an additional opportunity to make public comments during the regular meeting. I declare the hearing open. Mr. Kenny, you may proceed.
Good evening, Vice President Cooperman, Dr. Winston, members of the board. Tonight we have the second hearing on preliminary determination. Pursuant to Indiana Code 6-1.1-20, before a school corporation proposes to enter into a lease and/or issues bonds for the construction or renovation of school projects, resulting in total costs in excess of certain thresholds, it must hold 2 public hearings on its preliminary determination to do so. This second hearing is open to the public for comment. Also before you tonight are the following resolutions. Resolution 2024-11, Project Resolution. This resolution establishes the estimated costs of the project, the tax impact, and the timing of the impact. Resolution 2024-12, Preliminary Determination Resolution. This resolution sets the maximum of the following for the project: the term of the bond issue, annual debt service levy, and annual debt service rate. Other information including estimated principal amount, estimated interest rates, total interest costs, current debt service levy and rate, and estimated increase of the levy and rate due to the project are also required. Resolution 2024-13, Preliminary Bond Resolution. This resolution establishes the maximum amount to be borrowed, the maximum term of repayment, and the maximum interest rate. I would now like to introduce Jeff Hammond, a director with Baker Tilly Financial Advisors, to present financial information regarding the corporation's bonds and related debt, as well as a summary of the proposed bonds.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Good evening, Superintendent Winston, members of the board. I'm Jeff Hammond with Baker Tilly, and as Mr. Kenny stated, I'm going to go over the financial parameters that will be in the resolutions being considered this evening. Per state statute, this is the second project hearing, so the information that I will go through tonight will be a repeat of the project hearing on August 27th. So the first place I'm going to start in this presentation is just an overview of the school corporation's existing bonds outstanding. There are currently 8 bonds outstanding, and you can see the annual payments associated with each of those in an aggregate from 2023 through 2039. After 2039, all of the bonds the school corporation has outstanding would be fully matured at that time, and there would be no existing bonds outstanding. We're kind of going to revisit this slide here in a minute when we talk about the proposed bonds being considered, but I always like to start with the existing bond payments of the school corporation. This is a lot of numbers and it doesn't read well up on the screen, but this is just the data that populated the chart we just looked at. So for each bond outstanding, you can see the annual payment associated with each of those. And you can see that in 2024, the total annual payments on all bonds are at about $17.3 million. This schedule here represents the school corporation's general obligation bonding capacity, or GO bond capacity. Since these bonds are being issued as a general obligation bond, I wanted to show this formula to support that the amount being considered is within the school corporation's existing bonding capacity. This does not represent the school corporation's total bonding capacity because there are other bonding mechanisms available as well, but this does represent the amount that can be issued as a general obligation bond. And working through the formula here, The current general obligation capacity for the school corporation is at $15,851,752. So I'm going to go through a few of the project parameters that are in the resolutions being considered. I will note that these are maximums at this point, so these parameters in the resolutions are not to exceed numbers. Because these are maximums, we've used conservative assumptions as we've built these parameters, because again, these are, once the resolution is passed, if we were to exceed any of these metrics, there would have to be another resolution and more project hearings. So we set these conservatively at this point. We will know the actual numbers associated with the bonds whenever they sell, which we're anticipating that to be around the beginning of December of this year. So with these maximums, we are establishing the par amount, the maximum par amount of the bonds of $15,850,000. We are setting the maximum repayment term at 10 years, just over 10 years, 10 years and 1 month. The estimated total interest expense over the lifetime of the bonds, we're projecting that to be conservatively $5,820,433. I will also note that these are based on 6% interest rates. We're seeing the current market still in the upper threes right now, so those are very conservative estimates at this point. The maximum annual payment associated with the bonds is $2,264,300, and that maximum payment, utilizing the school corporation's 2025 net assessed value, translates to a maximum tax rate impact of 2.22 cents. I also want to mention that we have the, per state statute, we have the handouts required to be present at project hearings available if anyone would like to request a copy of those. So this chart here just represents a preliminary structure of a repayment on the bonds being considered. The green bars represent the existing bond payments we looked at on the first slide this evening. The blue color represents the proposed payments on the bonds being considered. We would issue those at the end of this year in 2024. The first payment will be due in 2025. So you can see where that comes on. And then the payments over the 10 years are approximately level at that $2,260,000-ish level. And again, these bonds would be fully repaid after 2034. My last slide here is just the existing bond payments in the left-hand column, and you can see how the payments associated with the 2024B bonds for this project being considered would overlay on top of those. And again, note that these are amortized at 6% interest rates. So once these bonds sell, we would expect these payments to be lower than what we're looking at in this schedule. All right. Are there any questions from the board this evening?
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny and Mr. Hammond. Mr. Hammond already asked if there are questions for the board, but my script says I'm supposed to. So are there any last call for questions from the board? All right. Okay, we will now have public comment regarding the hearing. We have received no cards, correct? So we will skip that step then. Thank you to everyone who completed a comment. Nope. Let's see. All right. Skipping all notes about public comment. We will proceed to the 3 resolutions mentioned in the hearing. Resolution 2024-11. We will be adopting 3 resolutions tonight as Mr. Kenny described to us in the hearing. The first resolution, 2024-11, the project resolution. Do I have a motion to adopt resolution 2024-11 as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Ross and seconded by Brandon that we adopt resolution 24-11 as presented, 2024. All those in favor of the motion to adopt resolution 2024-11 project resolution signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? No. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next is Resolution 2024-12, Preliminary Determination Resolution. Do I have a motion to adopt Resolution 2024-12 as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Ross and seconded by Ashley that we adopt Resolution 2024-12 as presented. All those in favor of the motion to adopt Resolution 2024-12, Preliminary Determination Resolution, signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? No. Any abstentions? Motion carries. The final resolution is 2024-13, the preliminary bond resolution. Do I have a motion to adopt Resolution 2024-13 as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Ross and seconded by Ashley that we adopt Resolution 2024-13 as presented. All those in favor of the motion to adopt Resolution 2024-13, preliminary bond resolution, signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? No. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you to all who participated in the hearing. We appreciate your time and interest in the project and in the future of our community. The hearing is now closed. We will move on to the last hearing of the evening. I now declare the 2025 budget hearing open. Mr. Kenny, you may proceed.
Thank you. Tonight is the public hearing on the 2025 budget. The 2025 budget is advertised at the state of Indiana's Gateway website as Form 3 of the budget, Notice to Taxpayers. The funds included in the 2025 budget include the Education Fund, Operations Fund, Referendum Funds number 1 and number 2, the Debt Service Fund, and the School Pension Debt Fund. Per Form 3, the budget estimate for these funds is $187,697,070. The estimated funds to be raised totals $74,517,315. The budget timeline at board meetings is as follows. First, tonight we hold a public hearing on the 2025 budget, which includes a review of the budget and the advertised Form 3. Second, at the October 22nd board meeting, the board will adopt the 2025 budget. Finally, we submit the budget to the Department of Local Government Finance, the DLGF, the first week of November. We will be going through a presentation that highlights key areas and data resulting from our budget preparation and process for the 2024 budget. The first two slides give detailed information on the district's ADM counts. These counts take place twice per year, in and around October 1st and February 1st. The ADM counts are used by the Indiana Department of Education, the IDOE, to determine funding for the Education Fund for the 24-25 school year. As you can see on the first slide, our ADM decreased in our first year after COVID. We have remained below pre-COVID levels since the 2021 school year. The second slide shows the actual state payments, the top of the bar graphs, we have received over the last 5 years, as well as the projected amount that we will receive in the 2025 school year, based on estimates from the state of Indiana. The amount we receive per student for the basic grant is shown on this slide as well. The per student amount increases have offset the decline in ADM count so that state revenue is increasing. Mr. Terwilliger will now present the data from the budget by fund, as well as our tax rates and tax levies.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Winston, members of the board. Our next slide is a comparison of budgets. Our expected 2025 budget in comparisons to the prior year are presented for display. Of note, our anticipated increases reflect mostly across referendum and debt service funds. These will allow for some appropriation room to cover anticipated levy increases across all these funds. Next are our anticipated levies across all funds. These are the amounts to raise. As you recall, the education fund does not have a levy as it is funded exclusively by state tuition support dollars. Of note, we are subject to caps in both referendum fund number 1 and our operations fund, all as presented. Referendum fund 2 for the 2025 budget year will see an overall increase of 13.18%. This tracks with our AV growth from the 2024 to the 2025 year as presented. Next are our anticipated tax rates for the upcoming budget year. As we are held to the lowest advertised rate by the Department of Local Government Finance, we historically set our assessed valuation, or AV growth, to 80% of its actual value to allow for a higher rate at the time of publishing. This is the top yellow chart as presented. What we expect, however, at our actual assessed valuation for the 24-25 year are the rates as presented at bottom, the orange chart. Of note, due to our AV growth and in conjunction with the levies as previously presented, we anticipate an overall decrease to our tax rate of about 0.5 cent in the aggregate. Mr. Kenny has some further information from our financial advisors that places our overall tax rate in context with other school corporations around our state.
The last two slides in this presentation show comparisons of the MCCSC with other school corporations as it relates to the tax rate. The first of these two slides shows a comparison of 2024 tax rates with schools with similar sized ADM. Our overall tax rate at 0.7344, we are shown as the second from the left district, and our 0.7344 tax rate is at the bottom of the column. Our overall tax rate is the second lowest of 10 other schools that are most close to us in the state of Indiana in terms of ADM enrollment. This list includes Center Grove, Noblesville, Brownsburg, and Avon School Corporations, among others. The second slide shows that MCCSC has the second lowest tax rate among surrounding schools, the surrounding schools who have ADM greater than 1,400. Again, we are the second district from the left with our total tax rate at the bottom at 0.7344. This list is 15 surrounding schools and includes Martinsville, Spencer Owen, RBB, and Bartholomew, amongst others. I do not believe so, because if we look in their column, there are zeros in their referendum dollars. So a very good point. We could be first next year. Or first meaning the lowest, which is ideal. Thank you for allowing us to present the 2025 budget.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny and Mr. Terwilliger. Are there any comments from the board?
It's just really surprising how fortunate we are to look at that list, because there's other communities there that I think would have a lower income overall of their community and have more tax rate, a higher tax rate.
We've received no cards for public comment for the hearing. Therefore, this concludes the budget hearing, and I hereby declare the hearing closed. We will now open the regular meeting of the board. We begin with the time set aside to celebrate members of our school community in the celebration of success. Ms. Harmon?
Thank you, Vice President Cooperman, Superintendent Dr. Winston, and members of the board. I'm excited to be able to share with you first our celebration of success, which is a feature of every regular meeting, and it recognizes the achievements of MCCSC employees, students, and volunteers who make a difference in our school community. This month, we'd like to recognize Tyler Abel, principal at Summit Elementary School, Marcus Debro, retired assistant principal at Bloomington High School North, and Molly Giddens, English Language Arts teacher at Bachelor Middle School, for receiving the Outstanding Educator Award from the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. Every year, the Bloomington Greater Chamber of Commerce awards educators that impact students in a positive way. The Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce will host its annual meeting and community awards on Thursday, September 26, 2024, from 5:30 to 8 p.m. at the Monroe County Convention Center. Congratulations to those three individuals. We're very proud. Should I go forward with the Equity Spotlight as well? I'd also like to share our Equity Spotlight Award winner. Recognizes students, faculty, staff, student organizations, schools, and community partners for fostering inclusive environments that reflect the MCCSC mission, vision, and core values. The September 2024 Equity Spotlight Award goes to Will Boggin-Sellers, science teacher at Jackson Creek Middle School. Congratulations to Will Boggin-Sellers, Jackson Creek Middle School science teacher. He's the recipient of the September 2024 Equity Spotlight Award. Mr. Boggin-Sellers embodies the true spirit of inclusivity, equity, and belonging in every role he serves. His leadership and unwavering support of the LGBTQIA+ school club have created a safe and affirming space for students to express themselves and find community. His open and restorative communication with students, parents, and staff demonstrates the care and passion he has for creating an inclusive school community. Thank you, Will, for your unwavering dedication to equity and helping make Jackson Creek Middle School a place where every student feels seen and valued. Thank you.
On behalf of the board, thank you, Ms. Harmon, and congratulations to those recognized tonight. This is the time set aside for public comment, but again, I think we've received no cards. Okay. Now for our consideration is the consent agenda that includes the following: minutes from the hearing and regular board meeting held on August 27th, 2024, ECA expenditures, overnight out-of-state field trips, financial report August 2024, appropriation balance report August 2024, register of claims September 2024, payroll register and payroll claims August 2024, request to declare as surplus and authorize disposal of out-of-date items. Do I have a motion regarding the approval of the consent agenda? Do I have a second? It's been moved by Kathy and seconded by Aaron Wyatt that we approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Against, no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next for our consideration are the donations. We have received donations of over $12,000. Thank you to all our donors. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. Do I have a motion to accept the donations?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Ross and seconded by Brandon that we accept the donations as presented. All those in favor of the motion to approve the donations signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against, no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next for our consideration are the personnel and additional personnel reports. Do I have a motion to approve the personnel and additional personnel reports as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Ashley and seconded by Kathy that we approve the personnel and additional personnel reports as presented. Dr. Henderson?
Good evening, Vice President Cooperman, Dr. Winston, and members of the Board of School Trustees. This evening, I would like to call your attention to the following administrative appointments and retirements. Before we move into the retirements, after I introduce the two administrative appointments, I would like to give them an opportunity to address the board as well. This evening, we are pleased to present for the board's approval Sarah DeWeese as our Director of Strategic Communications. Sarah joins MCCSC after serving most recently as the Director of Marketing and Communications for Indiana University Hamilton Luger School of Global and International Studies. Sarah has more than 15 years of communication and marketing experience, and she holds a master's degree in fine arts, visual arts from Indiana State University. Sarah?
Thank you so much to President Hennessy, Vice President Cooperman, Dr. Winston, and members of the board for your trust and confidence in me as Director of Strategic Communications. I have spent my career in communications for education across roles at Ivy Tech Community College, both at the campus here in Bloomington, as well as my current role at IU at the Hamilton Luger School. In those roles, I've served a number of capacities across PR, recruitment and admissions communications, as well as communications to support student success and making sure students are aware of all the opportunities available to them. Very eager to begin to meet with our teachers and leadership teams across all of our schools to get to know their programs. I very much see this role as being a connector within the MCCSC and ensuring that we have strong communications within MCCSC, as well as making sure that we have an effective two-way communication between MCCSC and our community and our families. Thank you again.
Thank you, Sarah. Additionally, I'd like to bring to your attention Christopher Harmon as the Director of Adult Education. Chris continues with MCCSC after serving the corporation as an educator for 22 years. Most recently, he has served as an adult education teacher at Broadview Learning Center, and he holds a master's degree in educational leadership from Indiana University. Chris?
Vice President Cooperman, Dr. Winston, and members of the school board. Thank you very much for having me here this evening. I appreciate your support and your appointment as Director of Adult Education Director for MCCSC. I have spent my entire career teaching for MCCSC, and I feel that's such a blessing. And this opportunity is a great honor. Adult education is near and dear to my heart. I have worked with these students for most of my career. I've learned their stories, their struggles, and I've learned a lot from them. A lot about teaching, a lot about life, and a lot about what's important, which is forming relationships. I plan to take that forth with me as Director of Adult Education and work with an amazing staff at Broadview Learning Center, and I look forward to this opportunity. So thank you again.
Thank you, Chris. Moving on to retirements, certified staff retirements that I'd like to draw your attention to this evening. Christy McBride, the Director of the Hoosier Hills Career Center. Christy has been with MCCSC for the last 12 years, most recently serving as the Director of the Hoosier Hills Career Center. Anna McClellan, a teacher of Spanish and Language Arts at Tri-North Middle School. She's been with MCCSC for the last 14 years. Finally, support staff retirements. This evening, we'd like to recognize Robert Poole, a bus technician at the Transportation Building. Robert's been with MCCSC for the last 21 years, serving as a bus technician, making sure that our students and drivers have safe and reliable buses to get to school and back home each day. On behalf of MCCSC, I would like to extend a special thank you to these retirees for their many years of dedicated service. At this time, I request that you please approve the recommendations presented in your board packet in the personnel report and the additional personnel report.
Thank you, Dr. Henderson. Do we have any comments from the board?
I'll just say that we're really grateful and excited for people to have their new chapters in their career and for other people to have new chapters in their lives as they retire. So thank you very much.
I just want to take a moment also just to extend a very special thank you to Christy McBride. We are so appreciative of the work that she has done, the partnerships that she has established, and the leadership that she's provided at Hoosier Hills, and all that she's done in support of our staff. So I just want to make sure that everyone recognizes and is in appreciation of her. I also want to extend a very special welcome to Mr. Harmon and Mrs. DeWeese for the work that you're about to do with us. And we're very excited about your leadership and the experiences that you're bringing to the table as well. So welcome to both of you into your new roles.
Congratulations to both retirees and both new employees and longtime employees in new positions. Welcome. All those in favor of the motion to approve the personnel and additional personnel reports signify by saying aye. Aye. Against, no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. We will move on to the contracts. Do I have a motion to approve the contracts as presented?
So moved.
Let's go with Ross. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Great. It's been moved by Ross and seconded by Ashley that we approve the contracts as presented. Mr. Kenny.
Thank you. There are 3 contracts before you tonight. I recommend approval of the contracts as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Do we have any comments from the board? All those in favor of the motion to approve the contracts signify by saying aye. Aye. Against, no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Tonight, 2 policies will be presented for the first reading. Ms. Harmon will provide the information on policy 4213, student supervision and welfare. Ms. Harmon?
Thank you. Policy 4213, Student Supervision and Welfare, is presented for the first reading. Changes have been made to update the policy to current practices and changes to Indiana Code. This policy is presented for the first reading and will also be presented for the second and final reading at the October 22 board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harmon. The next policy is policy 5200, student attendance and truancy prevention. Dr. Finley.
Thank you, Vice President Cooperman, Dr. Winston, members of the board. Policy 5200, student attendance and truancy prevention, is presented for the first reading. Changes have been made to reflect Senate Bill 282, which was recently passed, and this policy is presented for the first reading and will also be presented for the second reading and final reading at the October 22nd board meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Finley. As this is a first reading, no action is required. The policies will be presented for the second and final reading at the October meeting. Please let Dr. Winston know if you have any questions. Tonight, we have a couple of district updates to be presented. First is the presentation on Equity Goal 3, student learning. Ms. Harmon?
Did we missed the budget
There's the
reduction?
resolution 2024-14. Mr. Kenny.
We can go
Here
back.
it says that, that's right. Should be 8.06.
That's okay. Let me just get up to speed and we will go back. 8.06. Okay. Let's just do it this way. Okay, so the next policy is Resolution 2024-14, budget reduction. Mr. Kenny?
Thank you. Resolution 2024-14 gives the MCCSC treasurer an additional process for managing the budget throughout the year. This resolution allows us to work with the Department of Local Government Finance, the DLGF, to reduce our 2024 budgets towards the end of the year if the need arises. It allows for a much simpler process than what we have done historically. I recommend approval of this annual resolution.
Do I have a motion to approve Resolution 2024-14 budget reduction?
So moved. So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Brandon and seconded by Ross. Do we have any comments from the board? All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 2024-14 budget reduction signify by saying aye. Aye. Against, no. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Did Ms. Harmon run away? All right. We're back to you whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hi. Thank you, Vice President Cooperman, Superintendent Winston, and members of the board. I'm really pleased and privileged to be here tonight speaking to you about Equity Goal 3 from our strategic plan, student learning, and starting the year off with our presentation focused on our student learning. So, as a reminder, Equity Goal 3 is accelerating learning for students, including priority populations, with accessible and aligned high-quality curriculum and instruction. And we really have been looking at two outcomes related to this: accelerating learning through growth for all students, and identify and reduce academic disparity. We want to start this discussion by reviewing the definition of educational equity that we use to guide this work. So when educational policies, practices, interactions, and resources are representative of, constructed by, and responsive to all people such that each individual has access to, can meaningfully participate, and has positive outcomes from high-quality learning experiences that empowers them towards self-determination and reduces disparities in outcomes regardless of individual characteristics and cultural identities. That's what guides the work that we do when we look at this. When we speak about teaching and learning, we really focus on these key terms of curriculum, which is what we teach, instruction, how we teach, and assessment, how well we are doing. And again, we think about that as teacher and student learning. So to say a little bit more about that, curriculum is a comprehensive framework that outlines the knowledge, skills, and experiences students will engage with during their learning. And instruction is aligning high leverage practices and offering diverse pathways for accessing that content and engaging with the material and demonstrating their understanding. By having that multifaceted approach, it ensures equitable access to high quality education and opportunities for success. And then finally, assessment, which is qualitative and quantitative data to support student learning and help us make decisions. And they do work in the round like that, right? They inform each other. Then when we look at that, what we kind of think about as a roadmap for student success, it starts with those future-focused Indiana academic standards. We get that curricular guide of what we teach from our state, right? And we take that and we gather information about it. State data gives us a high-level look on how we're performing in those areas related to the academic standards, but of course, we want more information about our students than we have. And so then we have corporation data. These are assessments we use here at the corporation level to understand a little bit more. OGAT, we talked about this actually last month when we looked at high ability, DIBELS, which is, we'll talk more about, iLearn checkpoints, and NWEA. And then we can even more at our schools are looking at formative assessments, critical questions from their professional learning communities. They're working collaboratively to solve problems and using the whole child process to kind of think about students in their classrooms and how they're ultimately accelerating student growth and achievement. I mentioned just a second ago our whole child system. You probably have seen this before if you've been at a board meeting or other meetings associated with student learning. We think about student learning as academic, behavioral, social, and emotional, and that those are interconnected and they impact each other. And we approach each of those with a multi-tiered system of support that is dependent on the characteristics of collaboration and leadership, screening so that we understand what's occurring, making data-based decisions, using evidence-based practices, and monitoring what we do so that we can adjust and ensure that we're having positive outcomes. As we start to look at the current data that we have, here is our iLearn English Language Arts and Math Proficiency data from the 23-24 school year. You can see at the top, Indiana compared to the state at the district level, and then the graphs at the bottom break it down 3rd grade through 8th grade, which is where iLearn is administered. We are performing above the state in all areas, in all grade levels. But of course, we always want to do better, right? We want to see higher than 52% in math and 48% in English language arts. If we break that down by priority populations, we can see some of those. And we know we still have a lot of work to do with our priority populations who are not yet performing at the same level as their peers. When we look at graduation rate, we can see some pretty consistent graduation rates from 2018 through 2023, and again, we're above the state. SAT for both combined, English language arts, and then math, again, performing above the state average, but always have more work to do to ensure more students are performing at a high level. So when we think about that data, we use it to guide where we want to go, right? And so we look at that and we decide these are the challenges that we discuss: ensuring fidelity to evidence-based instructional practice and curricular resources. We want to consider how long COVID, both students that are continuing to experience health effects, but also the impact of COVID on learning outcomes is influencing the work we do. And ultimately, although we are very grateful for our referendum that has ensured good wages and salaries for teachers, and we do not have a teacher shortage, there is a national teacher shortage, and we need to make sure that we're keeping our eye on that so that we have highly qualified individuals. And again, we thank our community for their support to ensure that we can get really qualified teachers in our school system. And so then we want to have a systematic and foundational focus. So we, again, focus on that evidence-based instructional practices. We put professional learning opportunities in place that are aligned to demonstrated needs, and we have job-embedded instructional coaching, because that is essential. You can go, you can learn the things, but you want to be there on site in the job, working with somebody to reflect and put those practices in place. Targeted support, we have literacy, curricular materials, and instructional practices aligned with the science of reading research. We're deepening teachers' understanding of conceptual mathematics instruction to really focus on those areas, and using data-based instructional intervention and acceleration decisions. And then ultimately, we're committed to student excellence. As I said, we're performing above the state, but it's not good enough. We need to be excellent, so we're going to continuous assessment data to make informed decisions, implement evidence-based instructional practices, and high expectations for all of our students. So essential when we think about the things that we want to put in place are really focusing in this presentation on some of the foundational pieces we've had. And so one, again, is our pre-K expansion. Again, thank you to our community who supported this expansion, that 4-year-old pre-K to all MCCSC elementary schools with a focus on kindergarten readiness. We use a play-based curriculum that's rooted in research and developmental learning and foundational skills around inquiry, exploration, and discovery, and are aligned to the Indiana Early Learning Standards. And then this year, too, we're really focusing in the last spring, summer, and on into this year on professional learning for our pre-K teachers, on foundational math, literacy, and science, music, movement, social skills, and problem solving for those students in those classrooms. Again, with the goal, getting them ready for kindergarten. We focused a lot on our professional learning related to literacy, science of reading research. It's ongoing. The goal is to equip teachers with evidence-based instructional methods grounded in research to improve reading outcomes. We focused around the reading and writing rope. We have put word recognition with UFly, Heggerty, quick reads, morpheme for little ones, and again, some language comprehension, instructional tools with morpheme magic, and continued future work focus on word, sentence, and paragraph level comprehension work. Our instructional coaches have designed and provided ongoing professional learning opportunities. Training has been provided at the corporation building and individual teacher level, and we continue to implement practices aligned with the science of reading. For math, starting last year at K through 8, professional learning with Dr. Lori Ferry-Sales. It's in 3 phases for teachers. At the middle school last year, they were in the surface learning phase, which is building a foundational knowledge of the current research. This year, they're in the deep learning phase, and they'll move on to the transfer learning phase. And our elementary schools are in the surface learning phase right now. They'll move to the deep learning phase in the spring and on to the transfer learning phase in the future. And so again, those experiences include learning lab experiences, coaching and feedback sessions, and these burst professional learning sessions. They come together as grade level teams, and they're both as a group and then in the schools, mini lessons reflecting on practices that they see and really seeing it as a job embedded. At the high school, we're looking at the high quality curriculum and instruction that we have, grades 9 through 12. Collaborative work to ensure comprehensive understanding of Indiana's new high school diploma requirements as they continue to emerge. Increased access to dual credit and AP offerings with our Indiana College Core. And again, thank you to our community referendum supporting that access for all students. Instructional coaches, we now have specifically dedicated to support secondary buildings. We have continued professional learning communities working to support data and assessment literacy. And we have a focus on content-specific literacy to engage students in the type of thinking and communication to prepare them for deeper learning and real-world problem solving across content areas. And also instructional practices inventory, which is a practice that's to support increased student engagement and moving instruction to focusing on more interactive and cognitively challenging tasks that we ask students to do. Now that we've put those things in place, here are some of our initial indicators. So this is DIBELS. Last year was the first year that we administered DIBELS, which looks at literacy skills. And so kindergarten, first grade, and second. The yellow is the beginning of the year, and then the blue is the end of the year. So we can see that our kindergarten students, right, I gotta do my math now. The pressure of this is like, but right, lots of growth. Good. We see there's a lot of difference, right? And on to our first grade and even second. But again, those kindergartners, they've had all these foundational practices we're putting in place. So really some good evidence that those things that we're focusing on are having good outcomes. When we look at iRead data, so spring 2024 was the first time MCCSC second grade students participated in the iRead 3 assessment. It's the same test for third graders and second graders. This year it's a requirement that all second grade students take it. Last year was it optional. We decided to go ahead and do so because it's great information to have about students, right? And then from day one as third graders, we know what they need for their literacy instruction. So last year, 47% of our second graders, who are our current third graders, passed iRead. And so they don't have to take it again. They've proven that they are ready to go. So this allows for intentional planning for students in need of both intervention and acceleration from day one, right, of third grade. We know whether you need additional support in intervention or you need increased acceleration, right? And you're ready to take on more and be enriched in those areas. When we look at NWEA, which again is an assessment we use here in MCCSC and gives us some more data about how students are in skills, and we look at reading and math and growth from the fall, spring 2021 to 2022, and then fall 23 to spring 2024. We give the test 3 times over the year. This is looking at growth, so we see growth throughout. And I guess this is all to say that the data shows us where we are, but it's our actions that determine where we'll go. And together we have the opportunity to turn challenges into progress. And that's what we're focused on doing. We're looking at where we are and what actions we can take to continue to improve. So one of the things we wanted to end strategic plan presentations with this year is thinking about how these priorities can inform our next strategic plans. So really looking at instructional leadership. We talked with our principals, talked about the things that are in place, and really wanting to cultivate a love of learning for all students and be accountable to student growth and proficiency for all populations, ensure high quality aligned curriculum across our district, prioritize coaching cycles that continue to ensure all students have access to high quality instruction, and support our teachers and staff as they leverage new standards, iLearn checkpoints, science of reading coursework, math professional learning, and more to meet the needs of their students. Ensure adequate resources for our expanding population of English language learners, and maintain our commitments to the professional learning community's work, both in how we operate as a district and how we ensure all students are learning at high levels. And we strengthen our whole child and positive behavior intervention system, and we continue to identify ways to help those impacted by the academic and social impacts of COVID. And to end with a quote from one of our principals, we have put in a lot of effort to establish safe, inclusive learning environments in all school buildings. Teachers are collaborating with students to take ownership of their learning and track their academic data, while also celebrating successes along the way. I think that sums up what we're trying to do as a group as well. So thank you. Please help inform our strategic plan by providing feedback. Here's a QR code, which will take you to an online form. It's also linked on our website to say what you think is important about student learning in Monroe County Community School Corporation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Harmon. Are there any comments from the board?
It's my comment day, but since I only have 3 more board meetings
Get 'em
after
in.
this, everybody gets to listen to me for only a few more months. I love that we have cultivate the love of learning as our number one sort of thing underneath the priorities, or what will inform our priorities going forward in your all strategic plan after this. Because as I was thinking about the I Read 2, I mean, that is in response to a more harsh I Read 3 law that just came down to say that you can't pass on kids to 4th grade if they fail the I Read 3, despite the fact that educators have been saying that that is not based on good practices or research for kids. It's fair to them to give it to them in a non-pressured way in 2nd grade, I think, or at least it makes sense to me as a non-educator that we do that. But I continue to resent the fact that we have a legislature that is not educators deciding that kids have to be at a certain stage at a certain time. But I love that we keep it developmentally appropriate and as so much as we can. And I also love that we're kind of rebellious. Well, we're so fortunate in the leadership that we have and in the fact that we have preschool, which is a far better investment than punishing 3rd graders. If we had that statewide, if we would elect people who would be that way statewide, to ensure that would be such a much better and more developmentally appropriate and a more effective way of making sure our kids were good readers. I loved seeing that, the other thing I was going to say about good reading is that we are so fortunate that we have media specialists, that we have librarians, because it isn't so much that kids can read or answer what are these comprehension questions, but ideally we would love to have lifelong readers, children that come out of here as people who actually like books. And this is a real hard thing for all my adult children who had the good fortune of a wonderful librarian in their school who just turned them on to reading in such a big way. And they wrote to the authors of books and had a back and forth. Anyway, but the math thing, I'm glad to see the math thing also, because what I'm hearing is that they now have decided, since we have the science of reading down pat, that they're going to be doing the science of arithmetic and math next session. And so it's nice to see us preparing ahead for that. We're always doing those things, but anyway, I realize that all of that is an intense amount of work against a lot of pressure from above, and I'm grateful.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I have a quick question. You showed us a lot of indicators of where we are, and in most of them, we're above the state average. And I know you said there's always room for improvement. Are there any of those indicators in particular that you are focused on as an area where you think we should do better or could do better?
I really want us to do better with our priority populations. Absolutely. Does that answer your question?
It does,
Okay.
yeah. So reducing that disparity.
Reducing the disparity, absolutely, and seeing all of our populations perform at the same high levels.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board or questions? Thank you, Ms. Harmon.
Thank you so much.
Next is the monthly update on the consolidation of Childs and Templeton Elementary from Dr. Winston.
Thank you so much, Vice President Cooperman. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to update our board and our community on the work that's happening regarding our Childs Templeton merger. Lots of activities have been occurring since the last time we had an opportunity to share with you. Just as a friendly reminder, this is the process overview that we continue to use. You'll see this each month. we're really deeply into our community engagement. We continue to look at best practices and looking at our data. And our comprehensive facilities assessment is nearing conclusion, and we'll be sharing that information from the architects at our next board meeting. So we're very excited about hearing what they have to say. I also want to just remind everyone that all of the work that we're doing, consistently we reference back to the resolution that this board passed in April of this year, because that is the center of why we're doing the work that we're doing. In response to that resolution and the directive from the board, we did establish a project charter. And as you may well recall, the purpose of a charter is to kind of clarify what are the objectives, what are the goals, what's in scope for the project, and what's out of scope. And for those of you who are familiar with and experienced in project management, it really establishes the guardrails of the work to be done. And so we continually reference back to our charter to make sure that we're on point. The framework that we are working around is looking at this particular visual. If you look on the left-hand side of the visual, you'll see the inclusive communications and outreach. We've worked very intentionally to make sure that we're focusing on communicating effectively. We have engaged in authentic community engagement. We continue to refine our engagement activities and efforts, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in a moment. Looking at our data and looking at it from a contextual perspective, that's very important. Looking at the data in isolation is not sufficient. We need to make sure that we are looking at it within the context of our corporation, within the context of our community, and the students that we serve. On the right side of this visual, you'll see diversity principles and goals. Well, we have been a corporation that's been grounded in achieving equity, educational equity for many years. That certainly remains at the forefront, and I think that's at the forefront of the directive from the board to establish an approach to balance SES. And if you look at the next one, it speaks about SES integration and our student assignment plan. That really is some of the central pieces of work that we've been working toward, and I am going to share a few highlights of that work with you this evening. And then finally, I think a piece that is certainly ever present on our minds is resource commitment and sustainability. That's really about looking at financial resources, personnel resources, and how do we put together a plan that we can both finance and that we can sustain over time. So to understand this framework is to understand how we are approaching this work. Facilities assessment. Just making sure that everyone knows that, as I indicated earlier, CSO, they are continually doing the work. They have completed 3D models of every room in both of our school, of every room in each of our schools. So that's been really exciting, so that at the click of a mouse, we can kind of hone in on a particular classroom or a particular room within the building, sitting at our desk to better understand what is going on in that particular space. Their team of architects and engineers have met with the building staff administrators, as well as district level administrators, to make sure that they understand how are we using the building now, how are we envisioning using the building and all of the classrooms, and what are the space needs that we have. So we're certainly engaged in those conversations. Safe passage refers to how do we ensure that we can get our students to and from school safely, from their neighborhoods to the school and home safely. And so that's where the terminology safe passage comes from. We have several individuals under the direction of Dr. Henderson from the operations department have visited the buildings, have walked the neighborhoods, have walked the sidewalks, have looked at lighting during the late at night, well, not late at night, but in the after hours, just so that they have a better understanding of what our students are experiencing if they happen to walk to school, if they're bicycling to school, so that we can make sure that whatever recommendations that we come up with are consistent and appropriate. So we're very appreciative, and we'll be bringing that information forward in the very near future. And certainly community engagement. This just is a list of some of the engagement experiences that we've had since the last board meeting. I won't go through each and every one of them, but our intent is to certainly reach as many individuals as we can. One particular engagement of note was our community forum that was held on September 12th. This was an open forum so that anyone in our community who had an interest and wanted to share their thoughts and ideas could come and share. We heard from anywhere from 12 to 15 community members, parents, who had a perspective on what a successful merger might look like. They also were able to share some of the concerns that they have regarding this merger. And on our website, we have a form where community members, parents can share any type of feedback. The form is organized in a manner for them to be able to identify what do they want to see to make this a successful merger, and ultimately, what suggestions and recommendations do they have? To date, we have received 43 pieces of feedback, and I can assure you that myself and my team, we have read each and every individual one of those pieces of feedback, because that feedback is going to be very beneficial to us as we move forward. So I'm very appreciative of our parents and our families who have shared their ideas. I already mentioned our community engagement forum. The first one was held at Jackson Creek, and our next one is going to be held at Templeton Elementary. In response to the feedback that we received at this particular forum, we decided to add an additional forum. So we have the one from September. We're now adding one on October 15th, and we already had one scheduled for November 7th, I believe is the November date. We wanted to be able to provide additional opportunities for more specific feedback. And so I want to say thank you to the members of the community who attended that session, who offered opportunities and said they wanted more time to be able to share their thoughts and ideas. And so we look forward to a very productive session on the 15th, centering on what constitutes a successful school merger. Community messaging. We've tried to be very intentional. We've been responsive to the feedback that we've received. If you go to our website, you'll see this information that allows family members to read what we've been doing. Every board meeting, we post information from our updates. Family members and anyone throughout our community can complete our feedback form and let us know also their thoughts. So if you go to our website, this is what you'll see. There are several avenues by which you can access this information on our website. And right after Labor Day, we began another form of messaging, which is called In the Loop. It's a bi-weekly newsletter that we send directly to every parent of the Childs community and the Templeton community to make sure that if they haven't had a chance to watch the board meetings, if they haven't had a chance to come to any of the outreach events or engagement settings, that they have an opportunity to at least read some of the things that are happening. And so I want to say thank you to Andy Cope and his team for making sure that this is going out every 2 weeks to keep our family members and our employees in both of those schools in the loop on what's going on with this merger. I'd like to just take a few minutes to talk about our current school demographics. I think it's important for folks to understand the complexities of the decisions that we are tasked with recommending to the board. On the left-hand side, you'll see some demographic information regarding Childs. There you'll see that we currently have approximately 446 students enrolled. 12.33% of them are on free or reduced lunch. Approximately 14% are students with disabilities who receive individualized educational services. Our English language learners population is 4.93%. What we now know regarding transportation is 114 of our children of the 446 walk to school at Childs. We have a number of our students who participate in either the AM or the PM extended day program at Childs as well, and you see that information there. At Templeton, on the right-hand side, we have approximately 413 students, and this date and data is as of September 22nd, so it's fairly hot off the press. Approximately 64.65% of our students at Templeton are on free and reduced lunch. Almost a quarter of those students receive individualized education program services through special education. Approximately 9.69%, almost 10%, are English as a new language. 37 students are walkers at Templeton. And you also will see the number of students who participate in extended day in the morning and in the evening. That information is really relevant for us because we've had a lot of conversations with our teachers and with our community members and our parents regarding its extended day. So we're taking a very close look at extended day. Lots of conversations have happened around special education. So we are going to be adding some additional conversations specifically for our parents of students with disabilities to make sure that they understand the intentionality and the supports that will continue regardless of which school their student is enrolled in. Wanted to take a moment just to kind of share with you also some of the racial and ethnic diversity that exists. You'll see with the yellow what it looks like in Childs, in the light blue what it looks like at Templeton, and you can compare and contrast that with the district numbers as well. Again, this data is from September 22nd. So one of the overarching conversations that we've been engaged in since we began this conversation on July 3rd is around which grade levels are going to be in which building and how are you going to distribute those grade levels. And so we refer to that as grade level configuration. And so here are a few of the considerations that we have been engaged in talking about. So on the box to the left, your left, my left too, building number 1 could potentially serve children in grades pre-K through 2nd grade. That's approximately 348 students as of September 22nd. Building number 2 could serve grades 3 through 6. That's approximately 511 students. So that's one consideration that we're thinking about and examining. Another consideration would be on the right, the box on the right-hand side. Building number 1 could serve pre-K through 3rd grade, which is approximately 470 students as of right now. Building number 2 could serve grades 4 through 6, which is about 389 students. And yet another consideration, some of our teachers have brought this forward, and a few parents have talked about this as an idea that they would like some consideration given to, is that building 1 could be pre-K through 6, and building 2 could be pre-K through 6. And the thinking along with this recommendation is that there would be a randomization of current boundary lines, which would then be used to create the schools with similar demographics. So those are just 3 different types of considerations and configurations that are being discussed. I'd like to just take a couple of more minutes to break down some of the factors that I think will be at the center of our conversations as we continue to explore these options. For the Building 1 Pre-K 2 and Building 2 3 through 6, basically a primary building and an intermediate building. I'm not going to read all of these bullet points for you, but one of the things that people thought about and have already begun to explore is the similarity to a Rogers-Benford. So we know that Rogers-Benford serves K2 right now. So there's a thought process that there's already a successful model that's doing that. And so some of the members have wanted to make sure that that was front and center. I think the other one, certainly in alignment with early literacy and early numeracy, is really having an opportunity to hone in and focus on the foundational aspects of growth and development for students in those areas. And then really thinking about student-teacher ratios. So those are just some of the factors that are being discussed and examined, but it's not intended to be an all-exclusive and inclusive list. There are many more factors. Similarly, if we look at a pre-K3 and a 4-6, here are some factors that have been examined as well. Continuing to have the focus on literacy and numeracy in those grade bands, certainly at the pre-K 3 level. Thinking about how would we utilize 3rd graders as the big kids in a building, and how might they be able to serve as role models and mentors and or tutors for some of the younger students. With iRead, now going to 2nd grade, we would only do iRead in one of these buildings. We wouldn't be doing iRead in both buildings. And then really thinking about a more targeted, focused support for our support staff and our specialists. And then in looking at the option of having both buildings remain as pre-K through 6. The biggest piece would be figuring out what kind of a process of identification would be used, what might that randomization process look like, and quite frankly, how often would we need to do it to maintain some degree of stability in terms of SES balance. So those are just a few of the considerations that are at play. To complicate it a little bit further, I thought it might be helpful to share with you some additional complexities of the decision making that has to go into whatever recommendation will come forward in December. If you look at staffing, our HR department has already begun to take a look at staffing regarding licensure status of teachers. Certain teachers have to have, all teachers have to have a certain licensure to be able to teach that grade level. So we certainly need to look at that. We'll be looking at years of service, looking at the number of classes that are needed based upon the numbers of students, looking at grade level, and then certainly doing all of this in collaboration with our teachers union, MCEA. And that just highlights a few things. Transportation, really being thoughtful about how can we safely, effectively, and efficiently make sure that our students can get to school, and can we do that in a fiscally sustainable way? What does that look like? What kinds of recommendations will need to come forward in order for us to be able to do that, while also taking into consideration some of the sidewalk options and limitations that might exist, thinking about how do we minimize disruption to traffic flow in each of our communities. And so those are some of the things that our teams are already digging in and looking at. Food services. Food service considerations regarding how many of our students are purchasing breakfast, purchasing lunch, are eligible for different types of services for meals, and how is that going to impact our operations, our facilities, our labor hours, and more. Extended day. That too has been a hot topic during all of our conversations. If you have a student that might be in one building and another student in that same family that's in a separate building, what considerations are we able to provide relative to extended day? Will parents be able to have some input and or choice? Right now, you purchase the amount of time that you need based upon, I think it's a month at a time. Is that correct, Tim? Okay. So some families have indicated to us, I don't need a whole month, but maybe I only need 2 or 3 days a week. And so those are some factors that, as a result of the feedback that our teachers have shared, that our families have shared, we're certainly taking that into consideration. We don't have a resolution yet today or a recommendation, but I want you to understand the level, the depth, the detail to which decisions will need to be made about each of these factors. And then, of course, rooms and space. How many classrooms are there per building? If we look at the various configurations, how many classrooms will be needed, the size of the classrooms, the locations of the classrooms, and other spaces. What about specials, art, music, gym? What about lunchrooms and things? And so those are all very specific conversations. We are not leaving any stone unturned as we're looking at this and as we're thinking about developmental appropriateness for various age groups as well. So these are just 5 areas of the probably I dare to say how many areas that we are really closely examining, but I wanted to be able to share with this audience that there is a certain degree of complexity with every decision. Every decision we make in one area certainly impacts decisions in other areas, and yet we are very confident that we'll be able to come forward with some good recommendations for this board to take into consideration and make a decision. But we want you to understand that there's some give and take in those recommendations as we move forward. In terms of next steps, we have some additional engagement sessions already scheduled, and so here are the number of sessions that are coming up in the next several days. We are hopeful to have conversations with our faith-based community later this week. And if any of our faith-based community members are listening, we certainly would encourage you to contact Dr. Finley. He's been reaching out to make sure that we are able to partner with you, because many of our faith-based agencies and groups support our children in lots of ways, and we'd like to hear from them too about what safe passage might look like for them and how can they support our safe passage efforts to make sure that our students um, can get to and from school safely. And then we are beginning to explore what our student engagement opportunities are going to look like. We will likely be establishing a student advisory group so that we can hear firsthand from our students. And so that's something that we are eager to begin, but we don't want to get the cart before the horse on that. And then of course we'll have another update at the October 22nd board meeting. So as you can see, our teams have been very busy, very active, and very engaged in making sure that we are listening, we are learning, and we are figuring out how best to come forward with a recommendation that is not intended to make 100% of our folks happy, because that's not realistic, but that we can do the very best job that we can to educate every one of our children, and we can do it safely, we can do it equitably, and we can do it at a high quality, of high quality. And so that's my opportunity to share this update with the board, so I say thank you.
Thank you. Do we have comments from the board? Brandon?
Yeah, I do. Thank you for sharing that. It's helpful to see all that. I do want to have a question on the grade level configuration considerations. So the first two options are mergers, and the third option is redistricting, right? An isolated redistricting.
I think the individuals that bring that forward, they might be thinking that.
I just wondering if that fits into the resolution. That's just something for her to consider, us to consider. Is that isolated redistricting can it actually happen? Is that what the resolution was actually asking? Does it fit within that? Do we have to create something else? Because I believe that the resolution was focused on a merger, not on redistricting.
It is focused on a merger.
So I'm curious. I know that people wanted that, but I'm curious how it ended up here if it doesn't fit within our resolution.
The reason why it ended up there, to be very transparent, is that it was brought forward as one option that they wanted us to look at. And I don't know necessarily all that would be involved in doing that. We haven't had a chance to really dig into that option that was brought forward by the teachers primarily.
Okay. I would just hope that it doesn't get people's hopes up, because I feel like it's putting something forward that I'm not sure that the board has actually even considered or originally wanted in the resolution. Not saying that the board members don't, but I could see it possibly getting certain certain people's hopes up now that it's on there. So I just want to bring that up.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I had a question about that too, Dr. Winston. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but the use of the word randomization to me led me to believe that it wouldn't be redrawing catchment zones in the way that I think of with redistricting, but that it would be random as to who went to which schools. Am I understanding that correctly?
I believe that is what they are suggesting.
Okay.
But I am not the best person to speak on that option. And
Fair
if one of the members of my team who might have had some of those conversations would like to speak on that, that would be probably more appropriate.
Does anyone else want to weigh in?
Again, I think this is a concept that was brought forward, is being discussed by teachers, and that we wanted to kind of look into as the desire to truly engage in the process across community members. And I think I don't know that I can speak confidently too, in terms of we haven't had the same time to really to really work on what that would look like. But I think the attempt was a merged population, right? They see the resolution as a way to, as exploring options to merge two populations. And the presentation was like, well, if we merge the populations, can we keep pre-K through 6? And so what it really means, or how those populations get merged and then be representative of, and then balance the demographics of each, that's what's still at the table to explore, and I think is unknown. Does that offer any additional clarity on that? I think that's the best I could do.
Gives me a better, I don't know about Brandon.
So redistricting in general, then we could say that if we did a bigger redistricting, we could fit that in here too then, right? Because that's merging populations. Like I think we're getting a little bit outside of, I think the realm that we had, I just would be nervous that, because you could say that about a big redistricting, that could be the fourth option, because it's doing the same thing that other isolated redistricting is doing. Again, I'm not against it. I just I'm not sure that fits within here, and a little nervous that we're putting stuff in that the board hasn't maybe asked for even in the original resolution. So
I think that's important to understand.
Also- oh, sorry.
Well, I have another question about the process for deciding on the configurations. So in December, is the way that you envision this working that in December you will bring us a recommendation for one of these?
Yes,
Okay.
if not before.
And can you tell us any more about how you'll decide on which of these, or what factors or indicators you'll use to decide on which of these you recommend?
Definitely. Well, I think there are a number of factors. I think one of the overarching factors that's going to influence that will be the facilities assessment. And so the facilities assessment is coming forward next month. And I think that there will be information that we will be able to learn at that particular point in time regarding the use of space, regarding the size of classrooms, regarding other factors that will influence grade level configuration in terms of how many classrooms actually exist in each building. We have counted classrooms. We know what that looks like. And as we look at the various grade bands, as we look at pre-K2, as we look at pre-K3, the reason why the numbers are listed on the slides as well is because then we can take that information and figure out, could building 1, could it actually physically house grades 4 through 6? Could it actually house grades pre-K through 3? And so I think those are some of the factors that will go into the final recommendation.
Thank you. Ashley?
I actually had a question. We must have a lot of questions about this section because mine is also on the grade level configuration. We currently have something out to look at redistricting as a whole as well. So my question is, when looking at the different options that are here, has any consideration been taken into if a redistricting plan were to come forward to us as a recommendation that would take sixth grade out of the equation and move that to middle school, how that could alter these numbers or alter the configurations overall?
So the question has been raised in one or two of our meetings about the notion that was floated maybe a year or so ago about sixth grade moving to middle school. There will be no recommendations coming forward from me and our team about sixth grade moving to middle school as a part of this work, or probably anytime in the very near future.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the board?
I share Brandon's concerns about that, but I understand the need to show what people have been talking about. I think that one of the things that came away from some of the things that I heard, and there have been a lot of meetings that the board's been a part of to hear, but one of the things that I've heard from some people at least was the fact that cohorts would go together to these different transitions to different schools. Like, if I had all my second graders would be all going from, one school or, become third graders in the next school, so that those friend groups would stay and there'd be a sense of comfort in the people that they knew as they would go from school to school. And the idea of a randomization of that sounds a little bit destabilizing and difficult if it's just every so often we're randomizing who goes to what school. It sounds challenging. I also thought that I was really glad to see your demographics because it, however subtle, we definitely will be merging these two schools. We're not only integrating by class, but we will be integrating by race as well. And I think that was an interesting outcome of looking at that. And again, I've said this a lot. I think that there is so much benefit for all people in going to school with folks that are different than you are or from different backgrounds. It's something that I would hope everybody would want for their children because they learn so much from those experiences from from sharing space and learning and social capital or experiences and passion with people who are different than they are. And it gives it gives us those skills and understanding that we want for the citizens of our future, for the kids that go on to be part of our society, that they are accepting and friends with all kinds of people. um, I was at the community meeting in Jackson Creek, that was up there, that was the open mic one. And I wanted to say that Dr. Winston, your team did such a beautiful job of answering those questions in the back and forth, that you all were just reassuring and kind and socially, emotionally intelligent in the way that you reflected back to people what their fears were. I think everybody we heard from was from Childs. And they had a lot of concerns, and they were very reassured, and it also showed the audience and myself as board member there, the complexity that you've just given us a snippet of in this report of how much is going into this and how thoughtful everybody is being. And I would have found it very reassuring as a parent to be heard and to be knowing that you're looking at all these details. And I think, when we're doing some kind of big move for our community or for our district, it helps all children, not just the children whose parents are there to have their questions answered, but the children for whom the parents are not there, that we are all paying attention to the details to make sure that every kid will be all right. That's the group project ultimately that we're doing, as a school district, as a society, one hopes. So anyway, I appreciate this report. I still stand pretty strongly with dividing the the early childhood and the upper childhood, because I love that idea of them being collectively together. And so anyway, but I'm not saying I'm closed to completely to what might come down as a recommendation later, but I was surprised by it too.
Well, thank you for the feedback for sure, and thank you for responding on behalf of our team. Our team takes this very seriously, very diligently, and very intentionally. And I think it's important to note for all of the board as well as our audience that I think it would have shown a lack of transparency on my part to not represent for you this evening the entirety of some of the conversations. And so I think that's probably the most important takeaway here is that you need to know that these are the conversations, whether there's agreement with the conversations or not, that is the conversation that's taking place in the 16 or 17 different sessions that we've had. And so, in a transparent way, I think it's also important to note that no recommendation is coming forward this evening.
Right.
Although I thought that I would be bringing a recommendation on building level and grade level configurations tonight, but it's not yet time to bring forward that or any type of recommendation regarding that. But I can certainly say to you that it is forthcoming. But I want to make sure that we are trusting the process that we're asking everyone else to trust. My team, I'm asking my team to trust the process because we're asking our teachers and our families to trust the process, that we will come forward with some preliminary recommendations for you that will in fact be in alignment with what you've charged us with doing.
And I want to say that I appreciate that too. Like I absolutely appreciate how transparent, mindful, intentional, and accountable you all have been to this very difficult project that the board has given you all to do. And so I recognize that, and I'm so grateful for all of that for sure. And yeah.
And I am grateful for this dialogue. I am grateful for each and every question that's been posed tonight because it matters and it's helpful to us. It helps us to better understand, aside from the words on a resolution,
Right.
what it is that you want to see happen. So I applaud each of you for your remarks this evening in providing some additional clarity.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciate all of the work that you've put into this and that your team has put into it. When I see all of the factors that you've been looking into, I really do think that you are being so mindful of all of the pieces that fit in there. And in terms of the different configurations, yes, option three isn't something that we had ever discussed, but I just wanted to say that when I think about the whole reason for this merger was to balance SES. So if that is something that would indeed do that, you know, I just want to say that I appreciate the fact that you're listening to stakeholders because if this is a recommendation from the teachers, I appreciate that you are putting this in here because I think it is important for everybody to have a seat at the table. And so, like, this isn't for me to say I have a problem with this at all. I'm saying I appreciate um, all of the different ways that you're looking at it, and I do have faith in you and your team that you are the experts at this, and I I trust the process. So thank you for everything that you've been doing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and I'll just make one comment. You do not see the word option on that slide or on that page anywhere.
Okay.
Considerations.
Sure.
And I totally agree with you. And for me, the outcome was an integration of those two as a first step, an integration of these very closely aligned catchment areas and being integrated by socioeconomic status. And the other outcome that I was concerned about was that it was done thoughtfully and mindfully, and that certainly is happening. So I am very grateful.
I have one quick question, and it was something that Ashley brought up, and the option of moving sixth grade to middle school not being on the table at this time, is that primarily due to building capacities?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the board?
And 100 other complexities that will be involved.
But
It's
Yeah.
also not part of our, it wasn't part of our charge either.
No,
I
it
think, to be
wasn't, but
fair,
it was,
yeah.
again, it's something that,
But it did come up during conversation
Yes.
multiple times, and so that is something that was discussed.
Thank you. I just want to take a brief minute to reiterate some of the things that were said. I have also attended a few of the community forums and just been blown away by the time and effort and thought that's been put into these, and I'm so appreciative. I even recognize that during some of those comment periods, you field some questions that are probably directed at the board, and you do it with grace, and I appreciate that as well. I also appreciate the comments from the board because I think that it's helpful to the administration and to the public to know what we're thinking on these things. So I hope that you said as much, Dr. Winston, that that's helpful to you, and I appreciate those comments from the board too. Thank you, Dr. Winston.
I do have one concluding comment.
Please.
You have no idea how valuable your comments are and your questions are. And one of the overarching questions that we continually focus on each and every time we come together, my team will tell you that Marquez sounds like a broken record on this point only. What does a successful merger look like? What does a successful merger look like? And I would offer to the Board of School Trustees that at a future meeting, we engage in the very conversation that our team has engaged in 17 times with our teachers, with our faculty members, and with our parents and our families. I think they too are interested in hearing your collective thoughts. What do you think a successful school merger looks like? So I'm not asking you to do that tonight, but I can assure you that our families are quite interested in knowing what your thoughts are on that. And I do think that would be very informative for them to develop that level of understanding as we go forward and before we make a final recommendation for your decision making. So thank you for your consideration of that humble request.
Thank you, Dr. Winston. Do we have any final comments or reports from the board?
I do. Just to keep y'all so much longer and listening to me, but we just got back from our Indiana School Boards Association conference, and it was my very last one. And I just can't say enough about how meaningful it is to go and learn alongside other people who are elected by their community to do the best they can with what they know and what they have and are not perfect. But I was able to do my farewells as I walked through the halls to see people, and a lot of the people that I met on this thing because I became president right before COVID, which was pretty brutal, and so I feel I've at least served 2 decades. And they do a Zoom meeting with all the presidents in certain regions of your state, and so they sort of guide the conversation. But it is, I hope that this board will continue to be engaged and informed and a part of the outer network because it's not just our own community, but we have a real attack in Indiana on public schools. And in order to sort of push back, we need to understand one another and what the fights are and how it's similar and yet different in different areas. And for instance, Gary just got their first superintendent after being under state control with an emergency manager situation for, I don't remember, 6 years or something. And I'm so excited to see that they are getting democracy back because I think everybody in Indiana deserves democracy. And, in our area, I've been with people who, while we were dealing with, different struggles, there are little school districts near us who were just desperate to get a music teacher that actually had music certification in her license. And the parents were really upset because they didn't have one. And it's sometimes we're in such a bubble and we're so insular in Indiana and we don't realize, in Bloomington, we don't realize, or Monroe County, I should say, how much we have. And we say this all the time ad nauseum, but it is something to stop and reflect and be grateful for and figure out how we can band together and use our whatever privileges we have to try to help one another to make sure that all kids have the schools they deserve. So it was a really great conference, and the things that the School Boards Association offers you in terms of boards personship and all different ways to become a better board member. I in crisis would call them and get help over the years, and so they were probably like ready to have a party when I leave because I did rely on them a lot, but they were always so kind and so helpful in helping you figure out where your lane is and how to stay in it. And I've learned a lot. So anyway, that was my little boost for ISBA, and I had a really good time learning from one another.
Can I just say one thing after listening to what Kathy's saying? I heard you use words like democracy, and we've kind of talked about some of our concerns with the attack on public education and what the legislature has done. So I just want to, as a public servant, remind everyone that the deadline to register to vote is October 7th, and you can register online by going to indianavoters.in.gov, or you can register down at Election Central on 7th Street. Because Indiana has kind of historically low voter turnouts. So if we want to make a change in public education, we need to do our part as well.
Thank you, Erin. Other comments from the board? And finally, Dr. Winston, do you have any additional information to share with us?
I do.
That's fine.
So I want to share congratulations for Andrew McKenzie, who is a physical education teacher at Fairview Elementary, and Shanice Johns, who teaches 9th to 12th grade special education in a community-based classroom at Bloomington South. Both of those teachers from here are going to be participating in the 2024-2025 cohort of the Teach Plus Indiana Teaching Fellowship. Teach Plus is a highly selective teacher leadership program for teachers across the state of Indiana. The program trains current classroom teachers to advocate on behalf of policies that impact their students. Drew and Shanice are two of only 14 teachers from across the state to become a policy fellow, so we are very excited about their addition. part of my 100-day entry plan has been to provide a broader initiative to engage with our community and to strengthen public trust. Phase 2 of my plan was to establish venues that focus on strengthening family and community partner engagement, improving public trust, commitment, and confidence in the corporation through intentional efforts of transparency. Tonight, I want to mention 3 events that have been specifically designed to foster open dialogue between the MCCSC administration, myself, and our community. Parent University. On Wednesday, September 25th, we will host the next Parent University, Understanding School Finance. We're very excited about Mr. Kinney and the work that he and his team have done, but we're focusing on making sure that our families and our community members and our educators all understand the various limitations and opportunities that exist within various funding sources. I know Mr. Bunger is going to be joining us tomorrow night, and we also have another individual that's going to be joining us. I think Mr. Hammond is going to be joining us as well at the CoLab tomorrow night here at 6 p.m. And on the table as you enter the CoLab, you should see some flyers that describe the event. You don't want to miss this. We will be on Facebook Live, I believe. YouTube. We'll be on YouTube. So we want to make sure that it's very complicated, but we wanted to begin to demystify the information relative to school finance. And so this will be the first of several. And I want to say thank you to our Board of School Trustees for the opportunity to be able to do so. My first Listen and Learn event is going to be held on October 9th at Tri-North Middle School, beginning at 6 p.m. This is going to be a town hall style event, allowing for the opportunity for parents, community members, and others to share any concerns that they may have, to share what is going well for them within our schools, and to suggest ways to make improvements through authentic, two-way communication. We hope to see many of our families and our community members at this event. And then finally, Muffins with Marquet. The next Muffins with Marquet will be held at Lakeview Elementary School on Friday, October 25th. Parents and families are encouraged to join me in the library at 9:15 for conversation, coffee, and again, muffins will be provided. A lot of great flavors. Comment cards will be available for parents who have limited time for conversations, but would like to share some of their celebrations, some of their concerns, and their suggestions regarding our schools. Following our first Muffins with Marquet, we heard lots of great feedback from our family members that we've been able to act on pretty immediately. So I was very appreciative. I know members of the executive team have been appreciative to be able to hear firsthand what's a problem, what's a challenge, and what are some opportunities that we have to make things right. And then finally, I just want to remind everyone that fall break will be held on October 17th and 18th, and all of our schools will be closed. That is the conclusion of my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Winston. Thank you to everyone who attended and watched tonight. The next regularly scheduled board meeting is Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024. And with that, we are adjourned. Okay, is that all I need to sign in this?